support our local booksellers. So I'm going to introduce tonight's speakers, and then they're going to join the stage. So Rowan Jetté Knox is an award-winning journalist, writer, and human rights advocate with a special focus on LGBTQ2+ rights and mental health. His previous book, Love Lives Here, was a #1 bestseller, an Indigo Best Book of the Year, and it was chosen for the 2020 Canada Reads Longlist. Now, his work has been featured on the BBC, the CBC, the Today Show, O Magazine, The Social, and the Marilyn Denis Show. And Tara McGuire is a writer whose short stories have been broadcast on CBC Radio, published in Room Magazine, Chatelaine, The Globe and Mail, Guys de Tailly, Monte Cristo, etc., all over the place. And last September, Tara published her first volume-length book called Holden After and Before, which actually was a finalist for this year's City of Vancouver Book Awards, which happened here in this library in August. So what they're going to do is they're going to talk for about 45 minutes, and then Tara is going to open the floor to questions from you. So start thinking about a very smart question. So now please join me in welcoming them on stage.
Hello and welcome. Welcome, Rowan. Welcome to Vancouver.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.
How did you spend your day?
Trying to find food, trying to find coffee, going to a bookstore. That's trying not to fall asleep.
Oh,
yeah. I'm a little jet lagged. Yeah, that's about it, yeah.
Good.
Yeah. It's beautiful here.
It is also International Coming Out Day for those who celebrate. I didn't even know that was a day. I'm glad it is a day.
I kind of beat that to the punch a little
You
bit.
did?
Yeah. I came out before it was cool.
With that in mind, what's new?
What's new? Well, just a couple of things.
Just a couple of things.
Just a couple little things. Wrote a book. Came out. Moved to Toronto. Not necessarily in that order, actually. You know, just a few things.
I did want to ask you about, I guess, the timeline, because publishing takes so long, and decisions are made about covers and marketing and book titles and all of that, sometimes a year in advance. And then the books are printed. And then, things happen along the way. And I just wonder if you wanted to kind of let us know how that process went for you and your decision, along with the publisher and your agent, to come out before the book with a different name on that cover.
Yeah, that was a tough decision.
Yeah.
So I knew after I had submitted. So you know because you've written a book that there's a lot of back and forth drafts, lots of back and forth, right? So I think we had pretty much finalized the book. Everything was finalized. I had seen the cover. Everything was good to go. And it was off to the printers. And shortly after that, I figured out that, 1, I was a trans guy, and 2, Amanda wasn't going to cut it as a trans guy. And I was like, it's okay. So here's the thing about that book. I mean, the book, my first book, is squarely about trans issues. This book is about healing from trauma. And in the book, I do disclose that I come out as non-binary, because before I came out as a trans guy, I sort of waded my way through non-binary land a little bit to arrive to where I am now. And I just thought, well, it's okay. I'm going to put the focus on the book, and I'm not going to tell anybody that I'm Rowan right now. I'll just let the book come out, and then I'll come out. And that was what I had set in my mind. And then I have an amazing agent, Samantha Haywood, at Transatlantic. And ironically, transatlantic. I still giggle. And she said, okay, Rowan, I understand, but how does it feel to have to play a role? You have to be Amanda in public, and you have to be, and then you're Rowan to your friends and your family, your loved ones. And like, how does that impact you every day? And I said, it's hard. It's really hard, because every day I go on social media or I do an interview or what have you. And I feel like I put on this facade. And I said, but I don't want to take away from this book. And she said, I don't think that it would. And she said, I'm going to push back a little bit, because I think that you being true to yourself is exactly what this book is about. It's exactly what your last book was about. It's just part of your journey. And I'm going to have a little talk with your publisher. So she just took it upon herself. She was like just a solid ally. And we decided collectively that I would come out before, even though, as far as we know, this has never been done before. This has never been done before.
Mm-hmm. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Is that appropriate language?
Yeah. No, it's great. I was so happy.
I want you to know. Woo!
Yeah.
I want you to know, and this is a bit ironic too, that my husband plays hockey, and so I took some of his hockey tape and put your name, Rowan, on the cover. And now the hockey tape is a big, I don't know if you've heard about the banning Pride tape, which is another stupid thing. But anyway, screw you, hockey tape. Your name is right there.
That's right.
So this One Sunny Afternoon is a rather, I don't know, like a counterintuitive title in some ways, because it was a very devastating afternoon for you. And I'd like to start maybe a little bit earlier at the beginning, because most trauma begins in childhood, and the relentless bullying that you were subject to. I mean, I hope it doesn't ruin the book to say that you were lit on fire. You know, that was an absolutely horrific, scary experience. And you write afterwards, you know, some disassociation started to happen, and that there is nothing in the world that can prepare you for forgetting who you are as a child. And to me, that was just such a profound way to address a way of surviving when these kinds of things are happening. And I'm interested, though, in turning that around, and more as the book goes along, you remember who you are. You know, so in some ways, you forgot who you were, but then you remembered. And I wonder if you could just talk about that evolution from that very harmed person to a person who is now clearly very filled with confidence and agency about your identity.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand how trauma works. So I think a lot of times, because trauma reactions are so strong, when somebody's been traumatized, it's such a strong reaction. Like our nervous system goes into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn mode, right? And it's very instinctive. And it can feel terrible, and recovering from that when we come down from all that adrenaline and whatever else is going on at the time, the fear, it feels awful. So we always think of it as bad, but it's not bad. What the brain is trying to do is trying to protect us from from pain. It's trying to go like, okay, this is a really terrible thing that you're going through right now. So I'm going to just shield you from it in the best way I can, and I'm going to help you survive in the best way I can. So when I was a kid, I would have these lapses of memory where suddenly I just completely forgot who I was entirely. I'd be in, I think in the book I talk about, I'm in my parents' bedroom, and I'm playing with these little figurines that my mom had when she was a kid, and suddenly I am just a pair of hands, and I'm holding these figurines, and I have no idea whose they are or whose hands these are or where I am. And that is my brain just kind of just going into like that, for whatever reason, something was tripped, right? So that was just my survival mode. Now, as I started to heal as an adult, trauma is also very, very layered. It kind of puts these protective barriers up, like I said. And as we start to heal from that, the layers peel back, and then more layers peel back, and then more layers peel back. And finally, the brain goes, okay, I think you're ready to remember this event, or I think you're ready to feel this for the first time, or I think, and so this is what was happening to me. And it's painful and it's scary at first. It's really scary to have all these emotions that I didn't have before. But it's a lot better than forgetting who I was.
Yeah. And then the piece, which we'll connect back to later, of not just remembering who you are, but being who you are, is so very important. But if we move chronologically through the book, just when you think childhood couldn't get any worse, then the teen years come along, and it's difficult enough being a teenager, and receiving so much terrible treatment. Though the modes of bullying are a lot different now, I would suggest that the 2S LGBTQ+ community is subject to more of that, a disproportionate amount of that, than other kids. And I wanted you to express how this book came into being, because it was that act of bullying after you wrote your first book that really pushed this book into existence. In some ways, it is a sequel to that first book, because it wouldn't exist otherwise. But I think I'd like you to try and explain how that vitriol affected you and pushed you into this voice.
So first of all, online spaces are nasty. They just really are. And I spend a lot of time online. I still spend a lot of time online. I have to for my job. And also, there's some really wonderful things about social media. It can connect people and bring us together. It can help causes. I mean, there's all these different things that make it really wonderful. But it dehumanizes people. So it's so much easier to attack someone, from behind a screen and forget that they are anything but the words that you have just read that they've said, or the picture that they've just posted. This one thing that that you've decided is like their entire existence, right? And what happened to me was I wrote a book, my initial book, Love Lives Here. It tells the story of my my child. Hi, come on in. My child coming out as trans at age 11, and a year and a half later, my spouse of 18 years coming out as trans. So we had 2 trans people in our family, and my family collectively decided that we should tell this story, but it needed space. I had a blog, and I would write these little snippets. But for example, how my wife and I, Zoe, worked through her transition and came out the other side even better than we were before, that's something that has a lot of nuance to it and needs a lot of explanation. So I saved a lot of it for a book. And we decided as a family, and I had permission from my family to write it. And I released it. It came out in 2019. And it's still used today by a lot of trans people. When they come out, they give this book to their family members, or, mom finds out that her child is trans and runs out to the store and gets this book. Like, this is the type of thing. It's recommended reading at PFLAG meetings for a lot of people. I mean, there's a lot of these reasons why it's so good, but in that sense, because it helps people see it from that side of the parent and the partner. But the criticism of the book was that at the time, I hadn't come out as trans yet. I hadn't quite figured that out. My trauma hadn't healed yet. So I was presenting this as a cis woman. I was a cisgender woman who was writing a story about my trans family members, and there was critique that I shouldn't have written it because it wasn't my place to tell a transgender story or transgender stories. Critique is valid, no problem. You can always critique art. I would argue that I had every right to write that book, but other people felt like I did not. Okay, but what happens on social media is it becomes more than just criticism, right? It becomes an attack. So it snowballed. It started very quietly, like a low rumble where people were sort of talking about it over here on Twitter and over here on Facebook. And then it started to it just became this avalanche. And actually, that's what I called the chapter. I called it Avalanche, right? So it snowballed into all these attacks on my character. It snowballed into people who had never even heard of me before saying awful things about me. And even when I left Twitter a few days, a few hours after this started, I was like, okay, no, I can't deal with this right now. And also, my friend had just lost her child, so we were dealing with that as well. I was grieving. It just kept going, and I'd wake up to hate mail. I'd wake up to threats. I couldn't go anywhere on social media or elsewhere without getting, chastised and attacked. So it felt very, very much like what happened to me in the schoolyard. But it was a much bigger schoolyard and people were a whole lot meaner, and it went on for days and days and days. So I broke. My trauma came back with a vengeance. I had a full PTSD episode and I became suicidal. So that's what happened.
And that was the sunny afternoon.
That was a sunny afternoon. That was, oh yeah, right. We were talking about one sunny afternoon. Yeah. So yes, I went to the hospital. I was on the verge of taking my life. And at the very, very last minute, I went to the hospital and I got help. And one sunny afternoon comes from sitting in the hospital, looking outside, feeling absolutely horrible in May 2020 in the first wave of the pandemic. I'm feeling absolutely terrible. And I'm looking outside and it is a perfect spring day. And I thought the juxtaposition between these two realities is wild to me, but I just kept telling myself, maybe if I just hold on, I'll start to feel like that wow. I didn't sleep much last night.
We'll chalk that one up to jet lag.
There we go. Jet lag. That word that I can't say right now. There you go.
And in reading, you describe that scene so carefully, so tenderly, so pragmatically. I actually felt surprisingly calm reading it. I think because I know you're writing it from a place of safety now, which, you know, comes as a great relief as a reader. So obviously things worked out all right. But at the time, I think it's so insightful to be inside the mind of someone who is making that decision in the house where they live, whether or not to live or die. And you ended up going to get help. And I just wonder what it was for those who struggle or who have had those moments. Can you bring it back to any thought or any gesture that based you in yourself where you thought, no, I need to stay?
I have gone over and over and over this so many times. And that particular chapter is the only chapter in the book that's written in present tense because I wanted to bring readers right into the moment. It's also one of the first chapters I wrote, if not the first chapter that I wrote, because I wanted it to be fresh. I don't know exactly why I stayed, but I think subconsciously I knew that I had managed to get through every single difficult day in my past 100%. 100% of the time I had been successful in getting through to another day. But this time I knew that I needed to get help in order to do that. And the only way to do that was to, instead of walking into the garage, I had to walk into the you can come on in. Hi. Come in.
Welcome.
Grab a seat. Welcome. I had to walk to the car. I had to get to the car because if I didn't get to the car, I would not make it out alive. So I think it was just like a sheer, like this last little shred of survival, this last little shred that had not been completely my humanity, remembering my own humanity, and it had not been completely turned off. And I will forever be grateful for whatever it was that got me out there.
I know that the rates of suicide are disproportionate among the LGBTQ plus community. And I also see, and this might not be accurate because I'm looking at it as an outsider, that there is a growing resilience within that community as well. Would you agree with that? Or what would you say is happening now in terms of, I guess, fortitude?
I think one thing is we're seeing a real turn of the tide, unfortunately, where we're seeing a lot of people trying to roll back our rights, people trying to stop trans kids, for example, from experiencing safety in their schools. And this is how it started in other places like the US, and then it has snowballed into, well, let's just remove trans healthcare for all people regardless of age. And, so that's just a stepping stone. It's a wedge issue that they're trying to get in. So that can leave people feeling very, very hopeless. And I think in areas where there there's a lot of those rollback of rights. I tend to hear from more people who are in crisis, because I do hear from a lot of people who are in crisis. But also there's a growing movement of people in the community who are living very openly and living very defiantly against this, right? And one thing I really want to touch on here is something that a lot of us call trans joy. So just within the transgender community, for example, we see, and the world sees, so many sad stories, because there are a lot of really sad stories, and we see a lot of discrimination, we see a lot of hate. And if that's all you see, then where's your hope, right? So one of the things that I do, and I'm not the only one by far, is I like to demonstrate trans joy. Like before I came here tonight, if you follow me on social media, I don't think I posted it everywhere, but Instagram, Facebook, couple places, I posted a picture in this suit. I feel amazing in this tie, and this jacket. I can't even tell you. I feel so
great.
good. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, yeah. I think I tied it 8 times. Airly was there. Yeah, I was like, ugh, I can't. Yeah, I had to watch a YouTube video because I'm so new at it. Right. It is. Thank you. That's it. Yeah, I know. It's I know. I was like, come on, somebody know how to tie. But I was just like, so I try to show trans joy. I try to show, we know about gender dysphoria. A lot of people know what gender dysphoria is that deep discomfort that trans people can feel when how we see ourselves, or how we see ourselves is not aligned with how the world sees us, or how we feel when we look at ourselves, or, but trans euphoria is something that I experience a lot of as well. And I was just telling my gender specialist this yesterday. Wow, it's only yesterday when I was in Toronto and having my appointment with them. And I was like, when I see myself, when I experience this, I feel so good and empowered and right in my body, and everything feels amazing. And so I try to demonstrate that as much as I can. And a lot of us are doing that now. We're going here's me at my job. Here's me with my kids. Here's me, buying my first condo. Here's me out for dinner on a date. Here's me. And I think doing that, it just shows that trans people are just like everybody else. And so it's helping to build that, it's if all you see is depressing, but that you come across a handful of posts that are really positive. I could have that. That can be me. If we keep fighting, I can have that too. And so that's, I think trans joy and queer joy is part of our act of resilience.
And you talked about, feeling that joy in your body, which I'm imagining is the opposite. Why, thanks. The opposite of what you may have felt for a long time in the past, in some ways, the opposite of joy in your body. And I know that more and more evidence, both personal and scientific, shows that the body does remember. And even though we try to ignore it, eventually trauma catches up with the body. But somehow knowing this, I think, can help us understand why those small griefs and small losses feel so big, because they're stored, in the body. And I wonder how you now are able to use that knowledge now, that awareness, maybe feeling less out of control, understanding these huge swings.
Yeah, the body and the mind. This is the significant problem when we talk about mental health. People forget that it's just health. The brain is literally in our bodies. And the brain is attached to everything we have, but it's attached to it largely through the nervous system. And the nervous system is where a lot of our trauma gets stored. It hangs out in there, because that's a survival mechanism, right? It's how our ancestors learned to survive, by remembering what almost killed them, or what, or having that story passed down from their grandmother about how she almost drowned in a river. So we're pre-programmed for this. But what can happen is, as we release it, right? It can feel physically awful. I've had I've come out of trauma work with my therapist feeling exhausted, feeling like I'm getting a flu or something, like feeling, or like I'll wake up, before the week the book came out, because I was so stressed. I mean, on top of a book coming out, which is already stressful, I also had, I was also, releasing it as Rowan. And so there was all of that. I got this massive sty in my eye. I never get a sty, ever. My doctor looked at me and he was like, "You stressed, Rowan? There's stuff going on?" And he was laughing, right? But he's like, yeah, he said, "Did you know that styes are scientifically proven to be caused by stress?" So it's like recognizing those things in your body. So I listen to my body every morning, and I'm like, if I'm really stiff, it's like, oh, I probably have a lot of stress in there. I should stretch out. Like I do meditation, just being able to catch. It's not just catching triggers. By the time I get triggered, there have been all these other things usually that have happened before I get to the point where I feel absolutely terrible, right? So it's like, it's a matter of recognizing those really early signs and going, oh, okay, something's off. Let's do something to reset the nervous system before it snowballs into this terrible thing.
Yeah. And memoir, of course, is based in memory, and you write early on in the book, you talk about memory being imperfect, and sometimes needing to reevaluate the stories that we tell ourselves. So how has the act of writing this book perhaps allowed you to reevaluate some of the memories from earlier in your life, and perhaps recontextualize them in a way that they're manageable?
It's a big question for someone who's jet lagged. Okay. Gonna think on this one. So I think I'll go back to a part of the book where I talk about being victimized and not a victim. So in that part of the book, I have this really quirky doctor who I'm working with in my early 20s, and he recognizes that I'm depressed, but he asked me for my background, and I give him this big story. I'm like, oh, you're going to need more than one paper. And I sort of go on to tell him about all the horrible things that have happened to me in the last 20 something years. And he's like, okay, that's really, he deals with it in a really particular way that's worth reading. So I don't want to give that one up, but he basically ends up telling me that my big issue is, yes, I'm depressed, but also I identify as a victim, and that you can be victimized. You can have bad things happen to you, but you don't, but that doesn't make you, a career victim. And I thought about that. I'm like, he's right. It took me a little while to get there, but he's right. This is what I've been doing. So I think sometimes when we reevaluate, when we look back, so in that moment, I was able to look back and go, these terrible things happened to me, but they are not, they are not me. So that was one thing that I learned early on in writing this book. What really hit me, honestly, my therapist is going to be so proud of me that I'm saying this into a room full of people. I'm really strong. I'm a really strong person. I'm like, I got through some stuff, and I came out the other side of it. And it doesn't define me, but it did shape me. And that's okay. Like it's made me in so many ways. That coupled with all the good stuff and coupled with everything else has really made me the person I am today. And I really like the person I am today, except I can't tie a tie. But like otherwise, I know. And can't I tie yet? Thank you. You're my cheer squad tonight. I appreciate you. But yeah, like, I mean, but that's the thing, right? Like, I mean, I am so much, I think I'm a lot stronger than I gave myself credit for. And I think it's okay to own that.
There is a sense in the book of self-forgiveness, for those past selves that we can't really do anything about. But there's also a sense, I think, of almost forgiveness of those antagonists as well. And I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about the power of not holding on to that stuff.
Everybody carries their own wounds, and some people express them in different ways. I mean, trauma is something that a lot of us live with, whether we recognize it or not. Not everybody has a trauma disorder, but most of us have been through some traumatic stuff. And sometimes we learn lessons. Sometimes those lessons are subconscious. A lot of times those lessons are subconscious. So like in my case, I learned to be a massive people pleaser. That was one of the things that I learned. But in somebody else's case, they may have learned to take their hate out on somebody else. They may have learned to take their anger rather out on somebody else. They may have learned to take out all their pain on another person. And I think that's what happened with a lot of my antagonists. I think I directed my trauma and my pain inward, and they directed it outward. That's the only difference between them and me. Why that happened, can't tell you. I'm not them. Why I didn't end up like that, can't tell you. Maybe just who I am. But for whatever reason, that's it. So I can't hold a grudge against somebody else for having pain. And I don't want to hold on to what somebody else did to me, because that's theirs to own. It's not mine. And that has been a huge lesson for me, actually. And the way I sort of talk about it, like in a being in a restaurant kind of way. So I talk about, and I describe getting trolled online, getting all the hate online, and how I deal with it now. It's sort of like, if somebody comes up to me and says, and like if I'm in a restaurant and they come up and they hand me, the server comes up and hands me a plate of spaghetti, and I didn't order spaghetti. Okay, some people would be like, oh, well, I would just eat the spaghetti. I think once upon a time I would have eaten the spaghetti too, but now I just kind of go, oh no, I'm sorry, you got, this plate isn't mine. I didn't order spaghetti. I ordered a Caesar salad. And I sort of look at anything that people throw at me now from that lens as well. I just kind of go like, oh, whoops, you gave me something that belongs to you. That's yours. That's yours. That's your pain. That's your anger. That's your bad day. That's your life lessons that you're trying to give to me. That's your experiences. It's not mine. So I think that's just being able to do that and disconnecting a bit makes it easier for me not to resent.
The social media piece is super interesting because it's like this two-headed beast, where one side of it is really satisfying and really necessary, and you talked about that and the positive connections and all the cool stuff, but then it's also incredibly dangerous, especially for younger people. And one of the aspects of the book that I thought was so interesting is the way that you are working toward the importance of using dialogue in a more positive way and as an example. Showing other people there is a positive way to use this. We don't all have to be jerks on here. And I guess I wonder, why is it important for you to stay? You could just not be on there. Like, why do you subject yourself to this ugly two-headed dog?
I'm really stubborn, first of all. I don't like to lose. No, I think, all jokes aside, I think it's just a personality trait. And maybe that is the personality trait that got me to the hospital, come to think of it. Well, maybe we've unlocked something here tonight. I didn't even have to pay. I don't have to pay you for this. This is great. Not even my therapist. This is wonderful. But I feel like I just had an aha moment here. So, I was, so I think it's kind of like when my child came out as trans, we went into their room and like held them and loved them and, said like, we love you and, and we're here for you. And I didn't really know how to do anything except love my child in that moment. And then I left the room and I went to my computer and I looked up statistics on trans people in 2014, which, let me tell you, were abysmal. And I remember in that moment thinking, as I was looking at those horrific things, I was like, a lot of the things were things I had experienced myself, and even though at the time I wasn't identifying as trans, I didn't know I was trans yet, but I was looking at them, I'm like, this is horrible. I can't let my child go out into the world like this if it's so cruel. Well, I guess I'm just gonna have to fix it. I can't fix it by myself. But I think it was like this determination took over me. Like, well, that can't happen. So this is going to have to happen. And that's what kind of launched me into this idea that I had to sort of make a difference. And I feel that way about social media. I didn't want to just leave it. I wanted to create spaces that were better. Right. And I feel like my community, I still get a lot of hate. Like, people just come at me like you would not believe. But my community, the people who come in and stay and contribute and comment, and they're wonderful people. like wonderful people, and it's such a positive, loving environment. So yeah, why not? Why not create that instead of leave?
I wonder if you feel comfortable talking about, there was such a beautiful scene in the book where you're having a conversation in the car with your child. Is that a spoiler if you share it?
No, it's so a great
sweet.
story.
It's so sweet.
Okay, so in our first book, our child comes out as a trans girl, but this is 2014. Non-binary identities were not widely discussed back then, so they just knew they weren't a boy. So over time, they have, figured out that they're actually non-binary. So they've sort of, moved into like they, them, and they've chosen a different name for themselves now. Anyway, their name is Arden, and I decided if I was going to come out to anyone in the family first, I should come out to Arden. So I took Arden out for a drive in the country, got some coffees. Arden's now, I think at the time, like 18. And we're driving, and I'm like, so I was thinking of adding some pronouns. I'm like being really I'm really nervous. Right? And they're like, uh-huh. And I was like, I think I'm going to add they, them to my pronouns. Oh, that's cool. And I was like, cause I think I might be non-binary. And they're like, oh yeah, I could totally see that. Oh my God. Do you want to hear this new song that I just found? This is what happened.
Yeah.
And it was the best conversation in the whole world, because it was just like, I'm just informing you of my identity and what I've discovered about myself. Okay, that's great. Awesome. Anyway, let's continue with our lives. And it was like, I was like, yes, why can't it just be that easy all the time?
Yeah. I feel like younger people are way more fluid in terms of language. It just doesn't matter. We're the ones that I'm 50-something, and it's difficult to, I've had to learn a lot in terms of language over the last 10 years or so, even less, probably 7 years. I think the first time I heard a they, them pronoun was in a writing workshop, probably in 2016. It's not been that long. And so I wonder, language drives a lot of things. It drives law, it drives politics, it drives how we think about the world. And I feel such a lot of confidence, I guess, is what I'm saying, with adolescents and their ease with language and with flexible pronouns. Do you feel optimistic that, people like me who kind of get stuck on things are, going off the back of the hill maybe, and younger people honestly just have it seems to me at least, a much easier time speaking in language that is inclusive?
Yeah, this is we go full circle back to social media now, because social media has had a lot to do with this as well. Yeah. Because obviously school policies and the conversations kids are having at home and all of that is very, very important. I'm not taking away from that. However, what's really nice is that, for example, a kid who is in a small town with a lot of people who look like them and sound like them can now go on somewhere like Instagram or TikTok or wherever else, the cool kids go these days, and they can see a variety of people. Right? They can learn from a variety of people. They can see that not everybody looks like them, not everybody sounds like them, not everybody lives the same way as them. And how cool is that? So I think that has really helped drive things forward. I hear far more examples of young people educating their parents on LGBTQ plus issues than the other way around, which is really neat.
Yeah, it's great. The book really concentrates on mental illness and your path through it, through the sort of, I'm going to call it a spectrum of mental health, because it's never over. We're always working on it. And one of the things you wrote about is that not everyone understands the radio silence of abuse victims. And I thought that was a really interesting way to look at it. And I would add that substance use disorder also creates its own form of radio silence, in that it is very stigmatized behavior. And I guess it would be helpful to understand from your perspective that human impulse to hide something that is painful to you, but all the while knowing that if you asked for help, it would benefit you. I guess that urge to hide is something that's really interesting when we're trying to destigmatize so many aspects of our society.
Shame is a really hard feeling to conquer. And again, if we go back to social media, one of the things that people try to use to educate other people is shame. They try to make them feel bad, right? And the difference between shame and guilt is, oh, I made a mistake. I made an error. I did something wrong. Shame is, I am wrong. I am a bad person. And so that is not a helpful learning tool. And unfortunately, so that's the aspect of social media, but it also translates to mental health, substance use disorders, a whole bunch of different things, because of the stigma, people feel shame, right? We get told, only weak people, can't control their substance use. Only people who don't take care of themselves get depressed. So people don't want to go, or I know people who are concerned about issues about their health, but because they have a larger body, they're afraid to go to the doctor, because if they go to the doctor, the first thing the doctor is going to say is, well, maybe you should lose 30 pounds. Like, how are you eating? Right? And it's like, and a lot of things sort of get overlooked and dismissed because of that. So I think as a society, we really, really need to work on making these conversations open and honest and okay. It's part of the reason I talked so openly about suicidal ideation in this book, because I want to make it all right to tell somebody that you're not all right. If we don't meet people where they're at with compassion and understanding, they're not going to come to us.
I don't know if you coined the term or if it already existed, but stay day is such a beautiful term. It's the day that you made the decision to stay. It was that sunny afternoon, and you were able to somehow lift your face to the sun and stay. And I'm so glad you did. And I know that many, many, many others are also so glad that you made that decision. And I wonder if that term is catching on with anyone, or if you found people commenting to you on it, and if it's been helpful for others.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody else uses that term, but I decided to call the day that I decided to stay day. I just think that in that way I can honor it as a celebration rather than a terrible day, because it is about helping my brain not associate it as something really, really bad. It isn't. Yes, what happened was really bad. What happened was really hard. The decision that I made to stay on this earth, and all of the amazing, amazing things that have happened in my life since then, because my life is really good, that's all because of that decision. So why wouldn't I celebrate? So every year I go get a cake and I buy myself some flowers every single year. And then I go somewhere quiet and I just take pause and I remember how lucky I am. But yeah, people have been coming back to me going, my stay day is this and my stay day is that. And I kind of like that.
Yeah, it's great. I hope that it catches on. And I think that it gives people a reason, or it gives people proof, evidence, that if I make this choice, things can get better, I think, is what it does for me. Like, it really just grounds that in language. We mentioned at the beginning that this is International Coming Out Day. And I just wonder, for people who want to be allies, people who maybe are open to learning, what kind of advice do you have in terms of how to best support others in our community who might be facing that decision on coming out day, or any day?
Like the decision to come out? Oh, yeah. Yeah, I do. This is what I did in my hotel room this morning when I couldn't sleep. I came up with a list, but the list is very simple. I won't remember it all right now. But it's things like, remember that this is new information for you, but the person who's telling you who they are or who they love or who they're attracted to, that's not new information for them. So, the idea of, like, is this just a phase, or is this just remember that it's not brand new. Center their feelings, center that person's feelings. You might have complicated feelings. Sometimes, it's for whatever reason, cultural, religious, whatever reason, a parent or a sibling or somebody might have some kind of, emotional reaction that is complicated to a loved one coming out. Remember that there are places where you can deal with that. There are wonderful support groups. therapists, etc. So I would absolutely recommend that you deal with those there, and that you remember that you don't have to fully understand someone's experience to support them and love them through it.
Thank you for that. I hate this question when everyone asks, some people ask me, what's your next book? But it seems like One Sunny Afternoon is a sequel, as I mentioned, to Love Lives Here. But there's some unfinished business. Do you think that there will be perhaps a third book in this trilogy, which really would fit nicely together? Are you up for it?
Full disclosure, after I'm done this leg of the book tour, I am going home and writing out what I want to say in my third book, because who knew there was a third one, but
Yeah.
there is.
We're burning it down. Can we stay, Jorge? Okay. Wow.
Oh,
Dang.
neat.
Dinner's ready.
It sounds like I want service, like at an old hotel.
Okay.
Neat. Never a dull moment.
So, Rowan, if it's okay with you now, we'd like to open it up for questions. If any of you have any questions for Rowan, we have a few minutes. If anyone would like to, yes, go ahead.
I know you mentioned at the beginning about you had initially once the online hate messages were coming in. Initially, I heard you say that it was initially they were critiques that didn't feel that you were entitled to speak for trans people. Was that predominantly the area in which why you got criticized, or were you also getting criticism from, say, the right as well, or was it just predominantly a problem?
Just before you answer, I want to make sure, was everyone able to hear the question? Yeah? Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So I always get criticism from the right. Every single morning I wake up to hate in my inbox. So I'm really used to that. As used to it as one can be. And so that is something I've learned to deal with. Interestingly enough, once the criticism came out about me writing about my family and taking up too much space and that sort of thing, the right joined right in. They're like, oh, the door is open? Oh, let's attack Rowan too. So it was just like this huge influx of people. So yeah, it became everybody from everywhere just coming at me. It was a really horrible experience, because it felt like a schoolyard of literally thousands of people, and it went on for days and days and days.
I forget if it was you. Was it you who put the most heinous criticisms on coffee cups?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's me. And I have a Cricut for shirts, and I have made all kinds. So what I do is I take the most creative ones. There's some really good creative things that people say to me. Like, I got called a loathsome gaslit handmaiden. And I was like, that's art. That's like poetry. So I put it on a mug with like a floral pattern behind it. It's like my favorite mug. I have coffee in it almost every morning. Yeah. Yeah, I love that mug.
Does anyone else have a question for Rowan? In the front row.
Craig, going to get a bit personal about us. Is like you talk about, like, you're looking out the window and your sunny day moment. But like I want to bring up that it's not really a one moment thing. And talk about that. Like the fact that I was looking through my history here, and I reached out to you in May, and you talked to me and you said, okay, we'll talk again on a Friday.
I'll just reiterate the question so people in the back can hear. The book is entitled One Sunny Day, but mental health and suicide prevention is a long-term situation, and it was about the continued support that's necessary to support our mental health.
Yeah, so it isn't just one day, and that's the thing. Like, I'm healing from trauma. I don't believe personally with the type of trauma disorder that I have that I will ever be healed, right? And so I have to do things to safeguard my mental health especially when there's a lot coming at me at once. So on a good day like today, I'm doing just fine, right? I don't need any extra support. But when my partner lost her job and we were selling the house and we had just moved and my mental health took a dip again, right? And I knew that I had to go talk to somebody. So it is a matter of of recognizing that just like other disorders that people live with that are physical, I have to live with this disorder for the rest of my life.
And did you have a question as well?
I do. So, Rowan, in your book, you talk a lot about the mental health impacts of betrayal, right? And you talked to a degree about how there's a real low and it takes a lot. It can take a lot to get you out of that low.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the people around you showing patience and presence that were there that helped you with that. Now in your book, you look back to that as, you talk about you being all about your own happiness, which is what happens, and your loved ones being patient, right?
Yeah.
Now, after you've written your book and all this has been done, the patience of the people around you and your support network, you must have learned lessons since you wrote your book about support networks. How important are support networks, and how would you say people should build their support networks?
Support networks are really important. So I'm all for healthy relationships, not perfect relationships, healthy relationships of all kinds, right? A healthy relationship is one where, to me, I don't regularly leave feeling more depleted than when I came in, right? I either feel as good or better, unless they're going through a really hard time, which can happen, right? We all go through that. But sometimes we hang on to relationships because of loyalty. We hang on to relationships because, it's blood, right? They're family or whatever. So to me, it is really about constructing. I have sort of an inner core of people. And then I have a layer outside of that is relatively close to me, and then I have everybody else outside of that, right? And so I'm very mindful of the relationships that are very, very close to me, especially as someone who's a public figure too, right? Like I have to be a little more mindful of that as well. But it is like there has to be a lot of trust and really good communication, and having that changes everything. And yeah. Can I out you for a minute? Can I say something nice about you?
It is coming out day.
Yeah. It's that. So in the book, I talk about this incredible woman who called me from another province as I was leaving the hospital, and talked to me about how I was still loved and needed. And that was Morgane. So thank you, Morgane. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. You really helped. Yeah. It's so cool to have you here tonight because you were part of that support system, and I really appreciate it.
Are there any other questions? All right. Well, one more. Yes, go ahead.
I really disagree with you about social media. I don't think, I really believe in dialogue, and I'll talk to people one-on-one, and I think it's a good thing. And I know Morgane has told me that if you actually count up all the numbers on who's giving you social media, it's not as many as you imagine. I don't read it anymore because it hurt me terribly, because it went on with my partners and friends. And also it put things in my head I would never have thought of. And I can't take them out now, like words to describe trans people's bodies that I never would
Yeah.
It hurts your friends and partners. It hurts you. It hurts, when you walk around, I feel like they all hate me and they're on me, and you're like, don't read it.
Yeah.
It's like these are the people who can't get it together to have a conversation, and they obviously hate themselves and everything else about the world, and they're just trying to hurt other people. Like, why do I even want to give them a bit of my brain?
Mm-hmm.
Even to see it. I don't.
Which is really valid. I mean, I know some people who are off social media completely for that reason, and like, good on you. As an author, I need to maintain a social media presence to some extent. Now, do I do social media differently now? Absolutely. And I avoid certain platforms altogether. And I also have a social media manager now who goes through some of my worst stuff, so I never ever have to see it. And so I think there's a lot of that sort of thing as well, right? But social media, we have to understand too, is in its infancy. And so it's not going away. It's not going to go away. So we need to figure out how to work within that context. I don't think we need it to survive or anything, but I do think it's not going away. So we have to decide individually, like as individuals, what how we can use it or not.
Thank you very much for being with us here tonight. It's been a fascinating conversation. Thank you all so much for being here as well. The book is One Sunny Afternoon. It's for sale here in the corner if you'd like a copy. And we're so glad you made the decision on Stay Day. And your work is powerful, and it's going to help so many people.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Tara. Thank you, everyone.